My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. The witch is an ancient archetype, alive and thriving in the deep unconscious of all. She's the phoenix, proof that what once was burned was never lost, only reborn from the ashes. What is the work of the modern witch, and what may we learn from the practice? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Reverend Valerie Love, is the author of 24 books on practical spirituality, magic, the occult, and Christian witchcraft. As an ordained minister of spiritual consciousness, practicing Christian witch, and global retreat leader, her sole mission is to inspire to freedom. Her website is valerielove.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and new book, Witch: Divine Alignments with the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Reverend Valerie Love. Welcome, Reverend Val.
Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you for this invitation. I am looking forward to this discussion.
First of all, congratulations on your new book, Witch, which will be published the first week of October. And it's one of 24 books that you've written on practical spirituality and magic. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much, Victor. It has been a beautiful labor of love over the last year, along with our sacred storytellers who have their witchy stories in the book as well. So it is truly a collaborative work.
Absolutely. You are a prolific author, 24 books on practical spirituality and magic, the occult, and Christian witchcraft. You're also an ordained minister of spiritual consciousness, a practicing Christian witch, and a global retreat leader. And your bio says your sole mission is to inspire to freedom. Please share with us your early path and how magic first graced your life.
I had a very interesting childhood. I lived in a building in Harlem, USA, New York, where there were 4 generations of my families. My mother was a single mom. She had me at 19. She brought me home to her parents' home, and my grandfather's mother and father lived upstairs from us. So I guess I was the 4th generation of these generations. And so I grew up with my mother, my grandmothers, my great-grandmother, and they were very witchy. They just didn't take us to doctors. They had a potion for everything. Most of the time it was nasty. You know, you drank something, it had roots and shoots in the bottom of the cup. It was just very natural. The whole upbringing was very natural. I had a lot of interaction with spirits when I was very young, 3, 4. I remember at 3 and 4 seeing spirits, never afraid. I thought it was normal and natural until about 8, when my mother chose to be a Jehovah's Witness. Now, our family, even though they were somewhat Christian, they weren't fundamentalists. So this was a departure from the norm. And my mom went all in with Jehovah's Witnesses, fundamentalist Christian. It worked for her. She found her solace. She found her place. She had friends. A year later, she got married to my dad, who raised me. And so things took an abrupt turn at that juncture, because most fundamentalist Christian faiths do teach that if you see spirits, that's likely the devil or one of his minions. And so that's sort of when fear began to creep in of my supernatural experiences that I was having and that I was enjoying, actually. Well, not long after that, I closed my third eye. I hear a lot of other spiritual practitioners say that as well. So I kind of went asleep. And then when I was 29 and I had just given birth to my second child, got married in my early 20s to another Jehovah's Witness, did everything I was told as I was being raised in that faith. And when I was 29, I had an intense dark night of the soul experience. And it lasted for 7 years. And it was during the Saturn return that it began, and about 28 or so. And the doctors told me, well, you must have postpartum depression because you just had baby. And I was having intense fear. And what I understood later that the younger me didn't know then, and what I grew to learn, was that my soul was pinned down. It was caged. And because I was so afraid to step out and do what I was feeling the longing to do, I was in a stuck sort of holding pattern. Or at least I felt like I was, even though we're never really stuck. We're still advancing, yet that's what it felt like. I was having an intense pull toward the occult, and at the same time, fear and paralysis of moving out of what I had been taught, what was familiar to me since I was 8 years old for the last couple of decades. Well, the depression got so bad that I almost took myself out with a bottle of pills. I remember one day I was standing in front of the medicine cabinet and I pulled the door open and there was the bottle of 800 milligram Motrin that they gave me for pain after I had the baby and the healing process. And I remember reaching toward the bottle and asking myself, how many would it take to go to sleep and not wake up? I couldn't bring myself to say, how many pills would it take to just take me out of this life? I just wanted to go to sleep and not wake up. Well, the thought frightened me because at that point I had the baby that I'd just given birth to and my son, my firstborn, who was a toddler. He was a little over 2 years old. And the thought that brought me back from the edge was, who's going to take care of my babies? And so I jerked my hand back from the cabinet, closed it, and that thought scared me. It scared me to see how close to the edge I was. And it also awakened something in me. So not too long after that, I was in bed and I heard the voice say, get up. And I sat straight up in the bed. It's almost like you hear this clarion call. I sat up in the bed and it said, get dressed. And I thought, oh my goodness, a depressed person. I'm laying there like Count Dracula or something in the dark with the blinds closed and whatnot. I got up, I got dressed. That just felt like a gargantuan effort to get dressed. And it said, go outside. The voice was leading me step by step. I went outside and it said, look up. I looked up at the sky and then it said, breathe. Victor, I took a breath. That was probably the first breath of my entire life at almost 30 years old. And I wondered, have I been not breathing? And it said, walk. And I began walking. And to this day, 30 some odd years later, I still have a practice of going out, looking up at this sky, taking in the vast blue expanse in my eye gaze, breathing and walking. And from there, I took off. So that's sort of how it all began.
Please share with us about being an ordained minister of spiritual consciousness.
As I progressed on my spiritual path for about maybe 12, 14, 15 years, I had been reading books voraciously in Barnes and Noble, going to workshops, looking all over for anything I could find that would feed this spiritual calling in me. And I knew I was to teach. I knew I was to write. I've been a writer all my life. I write every day. Yet in the fundamentalist Christian experience I was in, it wasn't allowed to write and publish books. Pretty much they only wanted us to read the publications that were created by the religion. So it didn't occur to me that I would be an author. Yet I wrote poetry. I wrote essays. Every time I got an opportunity, I was reading. I had my head in a book ever since I was a little, knee-high to a grasshopper, as they say, all my life, entranced by the word. It wasn't until later that I found out I was a word witch. Well, when I really went deeper into I've got to serve the world speaking and writing, I knew inside of me that I needed some kind of formalized training, some kind of complete curriculum that would help me with what I was doing. Because up until then, I had been putting it together sort of piecemeal from workshops and this teacher and that teacher and just going all over the place. And there used to be this big sort of magazine or newspaper in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area. We call it the DMV, and it was called Pathways. And Pathways was a spiritual circular. And it told you all of the spiritual happenings that were taking place, all the metaphysical places. And I just made my rounds to all of them. And that's when I met Reverend Jim Webb at the Tacoma Park Metaphysical Chapel. And Reverend Jim Webb, he was a graduate of the New Seminary. And I just hit it off so well with Reverend Jim. Reverend Jim was my first in-person metaphysical teacher on an ongoing basis, one that I could really deepen into with him and understand what was happening to me, what was the ministry that I was called to look like. And so as I kept going, I said, Reverend Jim, after I'd been at the Metaphysical Chapel for a couple of years, I said, Reverend Jim, there are 3 places that I could go that I need to get this formalized training. One was New Seminary in New York, where he had gone, and he was a graduate of New Seminary. And I just love New Seminary, and I'm originally from New York, so that felt good. And there was another metaphysical preparatory, I guess you could say, school that was in Roanoke, Virginia. And there was Intervisions Institute for Spiritual Development, founded by Reverend Dr. Iyanla Van Sant. And I asked Reverend Jim, what would he recommend for me? He knew me well. I trusted him. I trust him to this day. He's a wonderful, wonderful being, so warm, so loving. And he himself was a graduate of New Seminary, and he was on the faculty at the other 2 institutions. So I knew he was a good person to ask because he was inside the curriculum of all 3. He knew their inner workings. And he said, well, if you go to Intervisions, you will do the deep work required within yourself to do what you are on the planet to do. And Reverend Jim is a powerful psychic and a medium. So I knew he could see what was going on with me and what would be the best fit for me. Not what would be the best school. They're all amazing. What would work best for me, where I was going, what I was called to do. And so I took him up on it and I entered Intervisions. Well, I originally enrolled to the 2-year program, which was an intensive personal development program in preparation to be a spiritual life coach. And after I completed the 2 years, they asked if you would like to, what is your intention for continuing education? And I knew I was called to be a minister, and the program is a minister of spiritual consciousness. And I knew that was what I was supposed to be doing. So I enrolled and continued and completed 4 years at Intervisions and was ordained as a minister of spiritual consciousness. And all it really means is a person who helps people spiritualize their consciousness. And what is that? Well, on any given day, we have the choice between fear and love, or we have the choice between going with the lower mind, more egoic structures, or we could choose love. We can choose the higher path. And so really my job simply is to choose the higher path, which is love in everything, and trust that. And as much as I can, inspire others who want to do it to do the same. So in that walk, we simply spiritualize our consciousness more and more, and we drop the conditioned patternings of maybe childhood or from school or from religions or other things that maybe were not the perfect fit for us, because love is the perfect fit for every being.
You've got me in tears.
Oh.
Because your message is the same message that is ingrained in my heart and my soul. And we could be brother and sister.
We are.
We are brother and sister.
We
Absolutely.
are.
No question about it. Thank you for sharing that beautiful, beautiful path. Before we discuss your brand new book, Witch, Divine Alignments with the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature, let's talk about some of your other amazing books. There's a few titles that just jumped out at me. The first one is Spiritual Badassery.
Spiritual Badassery is one of my favorite books because it has in it several of the coping spiritual technologies, I will say, even beyond coping, spiritual technologies I used to come out of the dark night of the soul. So I spent many years in the dark night of the soul. That first one lasted about 7 years. And then I had another one later on in life where mom passed away, divorce, custody questions, financial issues. All of this is sort of like a maelstrom of events all hit at once. And it was very difficult to navigate for those 3 years. Yet I was more tooled spiritually and I knew what to do, yet it didn't make it less challenging, even where I was at the time. So I created, or I was given by the divine higher self, methods and spiritual technologies that would lift me no matter where I am and no matter what I was experiencing. And I used them. I worked them. I worked the breath. I worked meditation. I really plunged into my spiritual practices. And they have been my rock of Gibraltar for decades. So in Spiritual Badassery, I share my most trusted, most tested, most worn out. If you could see these spiritual technologies, they would probably look like, a tattered old blanket that you carry around and still works and still keeps you warm and, really worn, because I work these, and the work works if we work it. So I decided put them all in a book, add mandalas and some coloring pages, add journal pages. And that is Spiritual Badassery. And people tell me they love it. It was basically me getting out of the dark night of the soul steps to do that, 10 specific steps that will get you out of any ditch. And there are also technologies in there to stop being afraid and to make a leap to becoming a dragon rider, I call it. So it is really a fun book, Spiritual Badassery.
And one more, Soulgasm.
Soulgasm is daily meditations for a bliss-filled life. And so each day you can read a quote and a word for the day, you could call it, and a principle that can really set your mind right. This is more for people who like a snippet in the morning and not a whole dissertation. So if you want this, a great snippet every morning, Soulgasm is the book for you.
What inspired the new book, Witch?
The time for the witch has come. She's here. She has been raising and her kind and calling us for decades. It has intensified. We see witch books bursting from all of the bookshelves in all the stores. more people than ever are intrigued by magic, witchcraft. We want to know what these spiritual energies are. We want to remove the fear, the dread, and all of the misunderstanding from the witch so that we can meet her face to face, toe to toe, and unlearn, be students of the witch, this ancient archetype, learn. The time has come for us to return to healing from the Earth Mother, because we have many ills now that are happening, and many of the ills, people address them with pills. And there is a better way. There is a higher way. And nature has a way of healing us. And though I suffered through all those bitter tasting things my grandmother and grandmothers gave me as I was growing up, they did that because they know plants work. Nature works without the side effects. And so it's time. The time of the witch is here.
The wisdom of Reverend Valerie Love, her new book, Witch, Divine Alignments with the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature. Reverend Val, please tell our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your amazing work.
ValerieLove.com, and Valerie is spelled Valerie.
And all the books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Where else?
Barnes & Noble, and some of them are available for sale on my website as well.
And also, what do you have on your website? And also tell us about your YouTube channel.
On my website, you'll see the books as well as classes. I love teaching classes on magic and money from my background as a financial advisor for 7 years at American Express. So I love playing with money magic. And on my YouTube channel, I teach magic, money, and metaphysics. I've been doing that for over 14 years to millions of viewers. I love it, love it, love it. I've met the most amazing people on YouTube ever. And also on the website are the retreats. Oh my goodness. We love our global retreats. We go all over the globe to really energetically charged hotspots like Sedona, Bali, Thailand, Egypt. We'll be leaving for our retreat in Egypt next week. And on these retreats, these are beyond being a spiritual retreat, which we all know about spiritual retreats. We've probably been on a lot of spiritual retreats. We love spiritual retreats. I do anyway. We also do rituals. We honor the witch. So we do fire rituals. We do water rituals, rituals by the river, rituals by the ocean. So in all of these locations, we do our magical practices. We do spell crafting and casting, and we do rituals. And engaging in rituals shifts the consciousness permanently. And so it's one of the most powerful and potent ways that I've found to align with nature, the cycles of nature. So that's a big, big part of what I do, is meeting people in person. I love it. And we always say in our global community, hey, we would love to see you so we can hug your neck, because we love hugs. And why not? Because we can all use with a little nice hormonal rush that comes from hugging another human being, seeing and looking at another human being in the eyes, being seen, and seeing who is there with you in the circle. It's just a great blessing.
And we'll be back with more of Reverend Valerie Love after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes. co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Reverend Valerie Love, her new book, Witch, Divine Alignments with the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature. Reverend Val, how would you describe the witch?
The witch is an ancient archetype, older than time. The witch is an emissary for the goddess, a way shower, a healer, a teacher. So when you encounter a witch in her physical form, because there's an energetic blueprint, which is the archetype, for the witches that we see walking around on the planet, the physical and physical form, you are encountering a person who honors naturally the cycles of nature. Somehow, before we know what to do in a full moon ritual, we're gazing up at the full moon. We're aligning our lives with the sun. We're awakening at the break of dawn. We are foraging in the woods. We're picking up sticks and stones. We're at the beach picking up beautiful seashells. So this is a person who innately, male, female, or otherwise, this is a person who innately honors nature. And we have secular witches. We have witches that are more spiritual in nature. And so there is a connection with the all. Now, a secular witch may not call it God or spirit. It's the all that we all are in and from. A witch is also a person that will have many gifts, psychic abilities, mediumship abilities, the whole I see dead people thing, right, from the movie. And the ability to telepathically, clearly and intentionally telepathically communicate with other beings, the ability to connect with spirits, the ability to know what plant to use for which issue in the body, in the mind, and in the spirit, or even the emotions of a person. A witch also is a person who understands healing and who loves to tend nature, keep nature, and is also a person who's a teacher. Many witches are teachers, very profound teachers. So it really is time for us to get rid of the whole idea that has been sort of implanted in the consciousness of humanity. It's this woman who's old, she's green, she has warts, she lives in a hut in the woods. Now, yeah, there are a lot of witches that have huts in the woods. None of them are green. Most of us don't have warts, and most of us are actively participating in the great healing and awakening that is going on the planet now. I believe that there are many witches called now because humanity is in this incredible awakening. Many have been called as witches and are answering the call.
Why do you think that's so important, especially today? That's really important, isn't it?
It is so important. Humanity is on a precipice. Now, the Mayans told us many years ago, and I have a home in Mexico in the Yucatan, and I live among many, many, many Mayan people. So not far from where I live is Chichen Itza, ancient city, and also Uxmal and many other ancient cities. And the Mayan were such a fascinating culture, and they have a different way of keeping time. And according to the Mayan calendar, we kind of all know that 2012 was that point where they said, hey, humanity's got to make a choice. Either we're going to choose to go up, to ascend, or we're just going to take ourselves out. Now, the planet will still be here. We will not be able to survive. if we don't change our ways. And so humanity chose to ascend. We made the collective decision to clean up our act and to ascend. Now, it doesn't mean that every single person does that every single day. It's all good. Collectively, we've said, let's have this spiritual awakening. And even people who are atheists can have a spiritual awakening, because when we're referring to spirituality, it's different for every person. For some people, it could simply be the experience of awe when they look at a sunrise or a sunset in Maui. Who's not awed by that? And that is a spiritual experience. Or seeing a child born, your child born for the first time. That is, or any time, each time. I had 3 children, so each time they were born, that was a deeply moving spiritual experience. So regardless of our belief systems, or if we're atheist or agnostic or Christian or Catholic or Protestant or Islamic, or all of the faith walks and all of the choices that we have as human beings, collectively, we have chosen to ascend our consciousness. We've chosen to evolve and go further and higher than where we were. We've chosen to think differently. And so because there's this great awakening going on the planet, there are so many of us souls like you, Victor, your partner, and many others who chose to come in at this time. And we knew when we came in, according to the birth dates that we have, that we would be of an age of wisdom at this juncture so that we could add to the global awakening. So there are many what I call keepers of the flame who have awakened, and they are fanning the flames of this global ascension and enlightenment. And the witch is right there solidly in that group, rising up. Witches who are the healers, the root workers, the teachers, the ones who say, return to the ancient ways of healing. We healed ourselves. We didn't need outside entities to heal us. This is what is going on the planet now. From my perspective, from what I can see, and I've been on this planet a little over 6 decades, and I can tell you it is very different from when I was a little girl in the 60s.
Absolutely. I've been 7 decades, and I exactly know what you're talking about. So
it's very different.
But here's something that comes to mind for me. You had mentioned the New Seminary, and I was a graduate, as you know, as we discussed before, of the New Seminary in the 1990s. And one of the things that I learned in the New Seminary, and by the way, some of my classmates were witches at the time, was that if you look at every faith and every religion and every belief system, at their foundation is an iteration of what we call the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, love thy neighbor as thyself. If everyone practiced that basic message, what a world this would be.
Yes. Healed in an instant.
And that's really what it's about. It's about looking at each other as sisters and brothers and loving one another and caring for one another. And if we all did that, if everyone did that, we would have heaven on earth, literally.
Yes. I think we can do it. I know we can do it.
I believe you're right. I believe you're right. I feel it myself. So why do you think there was such fear of witches, especially back 300 years ago, and the burning of witches and the time of burning? Why was that fear there?
Power. Humans can fear power. We have a tendency to fear things we do not understand. I've seen witches call down hail from a sunny sky, so I know that that's real. I've seen witches talk to spirits. I've seen them open portals to the dead, and people come over to commune with us, and then they go back and the witch closes the portal. There are many things that witches are doing that could be fear-inducing. And rather than succumb to fear, our generation has chose to learn. So when presented with something that we don't understand, we've never seen before, it's outside of our current paradigm, and it's especially outside of the paradigm of what we would call normal. So we're now in the realm of the supernatural. And everyone who has had supernatural experiences, we know when we have them. That's one thing. And it touches us so deeply that it causes us to think and contemplate and go beyond our rigidity and thought patterns, if we had any. It causes us to see things differently. They really change us. So witches are very used to phenomena, I would say. Things that seem like they shouldn't happen in this world. Things that seem like they defy the laws of nature. And really, there can be nothing that can defy the laws of nature because, as we know, the great Yeshua said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So somehow, there are forces that we just haven't discovered yet, or we don't know much about them. And so later, science would tell us about quantum entanglement. Science would tell us about physics. We would discover more so that we could expand the realm of what's possible. We didn't know that we were even seeing just the tiniest sliver of the entire light spectrum. We think what we see is all. And it's quite tiny what we are perceiving with our five senses. So we get to go beyond the five senses. And there are always people who are willing to do that. And then there are many people in the mass consciousness. If the mass consciousness is more rooted in fear, there's going to be a resistance to going into realms, occult regions, which occult simply means hidden. It's nothing scary. It's almost like a child that doesn't want to go to sleep because there's a monster under the bed, only because there's a dark space under the bed. So we get to be spiritually mature and understand there's no monster under the bed, that us going beyond our five senses is very natural, and that according to the Kabbalists, we are 99% of all reality is not ascertained or perceived by the five senses. We're only perceiving 1%. The witch lives in the 99% beyond the physical, even though she has a foothold in the physical, as do shamans. Shamans operate beyond the 1% world that can be ascertained by the physical, five physical senses. And so this fear, we've turned it to curiosity. And with that, as the waning of it, we realize maybe we shouldn't just continue killing people. Maybe there's a better way.
Absolutely. You are a Christian witch. Some might say that those terms are mutually exclusive. Please explain.
Yes, I'm Christian in that Christian for me is a spiritual path, not a religion. And that Christ didn't plan to start a religion. He was quite a rebel rouser in some aspects because he kind of riled up some of the people that were really deeply entrenched in religion, yet did not have the spirit of the law. And Christ himself was a magician, a wonder worker. Back in the first century or so, there was a whole group of Jewish mystics called the Anshe Ma'aset, who were wonder workers. They could call down rain from the heavens. They could stay storms. They could multiply bread and food, seemingly miraculously. Now, I do not think any of these things is in defiance of the laws of nature. And I do not think that any of these things are things that anyone and everyone couldn't do if they learned how to do it. So because he learned how to do it, he was trained in the mystery schools of Egypt. He was in a lineage of rabbis that were highly gifted. And it's a fascinating concept that humans do what they think they can do. So no one ran a 4-second mile because no one thought we could run a 4-second mile until someone did it. And then that expanded us into, oh, people can run 4-second miles. And then people do it more and more and more. Well, the same thing happens with staying a storm or calling down heaven, a hailstorm from heaven or rain from heaven. Now, we are the same energy that is the cloud. And there's a sympathy there. There's a correspondence. So why wouldn't we be able to do it? There's no reason why any of us couldn't do it. It's that many of us don't think these things are possible.
And consequently,
we're just not able to do them, because can we go beyond what our consciousness will allow? We cannot.
absolutely. In your book, you talk about the witch's code. What is the witch's code?
Well, we operate by a code, and many people may not be aware that there is sort of a witch's code: to know, to dare, to will, and to be silent. To know means, and it sort of looks like a pyramid. So if anyone looked it up in their favorite browser, the witch's code or the witch's pyramid, they'd be able to see a visual of it. Since this is an audio format, if it will be helpful. So to know means to know who you are, to know your craft, to know nature, to know astrology, numerology, tarot, divination, whatever you're called to know crystals, to know. Because if we don't know who we are, where can we go? What can we do? To know, to will. To will, for me, means to have courage, to be daring, to go beyond our five senses, to go look under the bed and see that there's no monster there. A witch has to will, it has to be courageous, has to be initiated from within. To dare means that you dare to do things that other people don't do. And to keep silent means that we don't talk about publicly all the things that we do, because there are spells, there are traditions, there are initiatory practices that it would be irresponsible to share publicly, because it requires years of preparation and study, many times mentorship with other witches and practitioners. And so the occult schools and the mystery schools knew that they didn't share this information everywhere. It was shared from teacher to apprentice. It was shared in circles and in the mystery schools. And the mystery schools still operate that way to this day.
Her book is entitled Witch, Divine Alignments and the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature. We'll be back with more with Reverend Valerie Love after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Reverend Valerie Love. Her book, Witch, Divine Alignments with the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature. Reverend Val, you have some wonderful contributors who joined you in this wonderful effort in your book. Tell us about a few of those, please.
Oh my goodness, the sacred storytellers in this book have blown me away. So the structure of the book is that part one is more about understanding the witch. And that's where I share my understanding, my experience of the witch. Then part two are over a dozen sacred stories about witches who've been having these very interesting, I could say, experiences about the planet. And part three is the ritual practices. And we offer rituals in part three, where you can actually get in there and engage with the witch if you are so inclined, if you're inspired or led. Well, the sacred storytellers, one of them is Icy the medium, also known as Icy Kendrick. Her name is also on the cover. And Icy is the witch that I spoke of, who was able to call down hail from the skies in Sedona. Now, I witnessed this along with several other people on a sunny day, and it really helped me to understand why people were in such fear, as we spoke of a few moments ago, because they just couldn't handle that kind of information. If the nervous system is not prepared to handle that kind of information in the consciousness, it can be alarming, it can be concerning or disturbing. We didn't have that experience. We were elated. We were thankful. And she got the answers that she went for. This was at the Amitabha Stupa and Peace Park in Sedona. It's one of our favorite places to go. And there is a medicine wheel there. And I will add that the medicine wheel still had the flowers on it from an earlier ritual, most likely by the First Nations or the natives of that area. And whenever that happens, the energy is charged and there is a pulsing, there is a space created where the supernatural can occur and without much difficulty. Well, Icy is a powerful witch, and right there in that circle in the medicine wheel, she had this experience of hail. So she teaches about that in her story. There is also a witch in there that I love. His name is Colton. He is a Christian witch as well. He is practices Bible magic and folk magic from the Appalachian Mountains. And he is one of my favorite witches on the planet. He talks about his struggle between being a Christian, feeling called to magic, knowing that he's a folk healer, folk magic practitioner, a healer, wanting to be in the choir, wanting to love God, and also knowing that he was gay and wondering, is he going to have the judgment of God, or is he going to be judged because he's a witch? So, he really draws you into his story of how the inner turmoil was for him and how he arose. How did he rise from that so that he's in a very integrated, soul-fulfilling path as a Christian witch? We have another one who encountered slaves in Portugal, spirits of slaves that were still in a prison where slaves were kept during the Middle Passage, and she was able to free those souls. We have another witch who was called to a reservation where she was able to help a boy who was almost at the edge. He was actually at the edge of death. And many witches are at the crossroads where people enter. So births. So we find many witches that are midwives, and deaths. So we find many witches that can either pull a person back from the dead or that help people go over to the dead, depending on what their soul is choosing to do. And his soul wasn't ready to go out yet, this little guy. And she got out her medicine bag, and she worked her herbs, her roots, and she worked her energy, and she worked her words, her incantations. So that story's in there. There's so many stories in there. Some of them are funny. Some are powerful stories of synchronicity, finding wands. One story of me being called out by a 6-year-old who pointed at me and said, "You're a witch." And his mother was horrified. That's when I was still a witch in hiding. And I thought, how did this 6-year-old just out me? Like, how did that happen? I thought I had everything really buttoned up and hidden, but we know children.
Absolutely.
And so the stories are incredible.
And you had mentioned the last segment of the book being about rituals. You mentioned the ritual of the dumb supper. What is that?
That is actually a meal eaten with people who have crossed over, souls who have crossed over, in complete silence. So back in the day, people would call people who were mute dumb, hence the name Dumb Supper. I call it Feast of the Dead, just so that we don't insult anyone. So this Dumb Supper, that's the traditional name of it. It's called the Dumb Supper. So we eat a supper that we have prepared in silence with the spirits of those who have crossed over that we choose to welcome and invite in. And it's an entire ritual. And I've conducted the ritual many times. I love it. And I offer it for anyone who would love to have a meal with their crossed over loved ones.
And you also share the rituals of light and shadow. What are those about?
The ritual of light and shadow is about determining what really is in the shadow that needs to be released, and leaping into a new spiritual identity. And so when we encounter darkness within ourselves, if we free up what's been lurking in the shadows, we free up immense creative energy. And so if we'd like to be free from some of our shadow issues that keep recurring in our lives, this is a great ritual to do. And it is a ritual that will enable a person to more embrace their light side while not running from or avoiding the shadow, because witches work in light and dark. We like both. We love both. And just like the yin yang symbol, if we balance those light and dark energies, as the equinoxes teach us to do, every equinox, as we're going to have an equinox coming up in September in the fall, and we have a spring equinox. It's a complete balance. It is the perfect equal of day hours and night hours. That happens twice a year. So it shows us the ideal. It shows us that we want to have a harmonizing of the light and the dark.
Many of our listeners have engaged or had mystical experiences. Why are our mystical stories so important?
When we have a mystical experience, and this was happening to me, I felt weird. I felt like the odd person out. I looked around me and I saw a lot of Christian people, beautiful people, wonderful people. They loved me. They couldn't understand what I was talking about, nor could they help me in the unfolding of my gifts that were awakening and spilling out by me saying things that were going to happen. And then they happened. And then people looked at me in fear, like, how did you know that? And what's going on? And they couldn't help me, even though they loved me. So if you continue to have mystical experiences and you are surrounded by people who don't quite get it, who are like, okay, well, I love you, so hey, whatever, and are not able to fan your flame so that you go higher, have more mystical experiences, say, yes, you're on the path. It's great to pick up a book and say, oh my goodness, I was thinking that exact same thing. Or, oh, I see dead people. Or I looked at a leaf the other day and just started bawling, crying. You know how you're having a mystical experience? You just look at a leaf and all of a sudden you're just overcome and just bawling. These mystical experiences are happening to all of us. And when we share them, it takes the weirdness out. It takes the I'm alone out. We're together in this thing. We're all rising and we're all having interesting things happen. And we get to embrace that.
The wisdom of Reverend Valerie Love, her new book, Witch, Divine Alignments with the Primordial Energies of Magic and Cycles of Nature. Reverend Val, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your amazing work.
ValerieLove.com, and the YouTube channel is at ValerieLoveTV.com.
And what events are taking place for you right now?
Coming up, we have this fall equinox, which will be taking place on September 22nd this year, and we'll be doing that ritual in Egypt. We have the winter solstice. We'll be doing that ritual in Miami. We have the spring equinox in 2024. That event will be taking place in Peru with Mother Ayahuasca and a Temazcal, which is the sweat lodge. And then next year, on the Lionsgate, we'll be departing to go to Bali, Thailand, India, and China, to hot spots all over those regions and the ensuing rituals as well. So we've got a lot coming up, and we've done a lot, and we're doing even more.
Reverend Val, my gratitude to you for joining us and sharing this wonderful wisdom and experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. It's been a stimulating conversation.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.